Have you ever noticed that while the entire world seems to lose its mind over the latest craze, there is always that one individual who remains totally unfazed? Think about Black Friday. They aren't the ones camping out in a parking lot. A viral TikTok challenge with tens of millions of views? They aren't interested in filming their own version. When everyone else shifts their personal style or political stance overnight, these people stay exactly the same. They don't experience panic, they don't suffer from FOMO, and they feel no pressure to prove their worth to anyone. Here is the fascinating part. If you assume these individuals are simply falling behind or trying to be edgy by acting different, you are mistaken. It isn't that they lack information, they are fully aware of what is happening. However, instead of being swept up by the momentum of the herd, their minds activate a specific psychological defense mechanism that most people lack. Today, we are going to analyze 5 distinct psychological indicators of people who refuse to chase trends. If you recognize yourself in this description, this video will identify the specific hidden strength you have been utilizing. And if you are exhausted from constantly trying to keep up with social media, you will discover how to reclaim sovereignty over your own thoughts. Let us begin with a fundamental question. Why do we feel the urge to follow trends in the first place? It is because behind every viral movement, there is a powerful force that is very difficult to ignore. In the field of psychology, this is typically categorized into 2 forms: external validation and internal validation. Let's look at external validation first. This occurs when your sense of self-worth is determined by the people around you. You put on a shirt that is currently in fashion, and people tell you that you look great. You replicate a popular dance and receive thousands of digital likes. Immediately, your brain is flooded with dopamine. You feel a sense of belonging to the tribe. You feel protected. You feel significant. That is the power of external validation. However, people who distance themselves from trends operate differently. They are fueled by the energy of internal validation. Their personal value is dictated by the benchmarks they establish for themselves. They experience true satisfaction when they remain true to their principles, perform their work with excellence, or simply engage in a private hobby that nobody else even knows about. Psychological studies indicate that individuals with high levels of self-awareness, meaning they have a deep understanding of their own identity, tend to lean much more heavily on this internal well of validation. They do not require an audience to applaud for them to know they are on the right path. Once you grasp this foundation, you will begin to see human behavior through a totally different lens. People who avoid trends do not necessarily despise them. They aren't sitting at home complaining about people making videos. They don't have a grudge against those buying the latest smartphone. They simply do not allow these trends to define their identity. To them, a trend is just like the weather. It shifts every single day. Building on this solid foundation, let's move to the first major sign of internally validated individuals. These individuals possess an exceptionally clear and consistent identity. Psychologist Jennifer Campbell refers to this psychological state as self-concept clarity. Look at it this way: your identity is like a canvas. For many people, that canvas is never more than a rough pencil sketch. Today, society might be obsessed with quiet luxury, so they rub out the old drawing and sketch something new. Next month, when social media becomes fixated on Y2K fashion, they erase it again and start over from scratch. They use fleeting trends to fill in the empty gaps in their own personality. Campbell's research demonstrates that when self-concept clarity is low, people are far more susceptible to being rattled by social judgment. But for those with high self-concept clarity, their self-portrait has been finished, framed, and hung on the wall for years. They possess a sharp, high-definition image of who they are. They know exactly which foods they enjoy, what kind of music moves them, and which clothes make them feel truly at ease. A man might choose to wear the same basic black shirt and denim jeans for a decade. A woman might have a passion for 1980s jazz even if every one of her peers is listening to the latest pop star. Because their internal painting is already complete, they feel no internal pressure to alter their aesthetics. They also feel no pressure to change their views or their interests just to blend in. When a massive trend hits, like the sudden obsession with cold plunges, waking up at 5 a.m. and sitting in a tub of ice just to post it on Instagram to prove how healthy and disciplined they are. If that person prefers starting their morning with a warm latte and a book in the quiet, they will simply make their coffee. They won't go out and buy an ice tub. They aren't tempted at all. What is the fundamental difference here? They aren't actively fighting against the trend. They aren't online posting angry rants against it. They simply do not need that trend to validate whether they are living a disciplined or healthy life. Their identity is already whole on its own. However, this internal stability also leads to a very interesting side effect when they interact with the masses. This brings us to the second sign. They tend to lose interest almost immediately once something becomes mainstream. Why does this happen? Personality research suggests that individuals who score high in openness and are less affected by the pressure of social conformity tend to have a unique reaction to mass popularity. To put it simply, they are drawn to things that feel genuinely novel. Conversely, they have a strong aversion to repetition and copy-paste behavior. Imagine you accidentally find a fantastic song by a small, independent band. You love it because the sound is unique. It has real depth. You feel a sense of fulfillment because you discovered something meaningful on your own. But 3 weeks later, that song is at the top of the charts. It gets sliced into a 15-second loop for social media. You scroll through your feed, and you hear it everywhere. Millions of people are performing the same dance to it or using it as background noise for food reviews. So, what happens inside the mind of a person who doesn't follow trends? Their emotional engagement plummets. They lose interest. It isn't that the music suddenly became low quality. It is because once a thing becomes too common, it loses that initial magic of discovery. It transforms into mass imitation. For their brain, there is no longer enough genuine novelty to stay excited about something that millions of others are already mimicking. Many observers look at this and think, oh, these people just want to feel special. As soon as something gets popular, they turn their backs on it. But that isn't the reality. The core distinction is this. They aren't rejecting trends to feel superior. They aren't avoiding them out of some stubborn moral code. They move on because the stimulation is gone. It no longer provides them with any unique value. So, rather than staying and mimicking the crowd on autopilot, they choose to move forward. They are happy to let the masses enjoy the trend while they head off to find something fresh to investigate. And because they are always looking for genuine substance rather than surface-level hype, they develop an incredibly strict filter. That leads us to the third sign. They maintain much higher standards of evaluation than the general public. In the field of behavioral psychology, researchers have identified a curious pattern. After being swept up in a collective hype cycle and feeling let down, people often develop a heightened level of skepticism. They weren't necessarily born this way. In the past, they might have followed the crowd just like everyone else. They might have purchased a bread maker during lockdown because everyone on the internet had one, only to find it gathering dust 6 months later. They might have invested in a get-rich-quick scheme because of FOMO, only to find it was a hollow promise. From those moments, they constructed a new mental reflex. They learned a painful lesson. Being viral does not mean something is valuable. The volume of people talking about a topic is not a guarantee of its quality. Consequently, they developed a highly effective defensive habit: wait, watch, and evaluate. When a brand new trend explodes, perhaps a new crypto investment or a miracle diet, while the crowd rushes in for fear of missing out, these individuals do something different. They do not react instantly, unlike many others who are quick to jump on the bandwagon. They take a step back, creating distance from the initial frenzy. They observe with their arms folded, a posture of calm scrutiny. They wait for the bubble of hype to deflate slightly, letting the initial excitement subside. They wait until the blind enthusiasm dies down and the honest reviews start surfacing. Only then do they apply their own internal criteria to decide if it actually adds any practical benefit to their life. Again, what is the main difference in their approach? Their skepticism isn't coming from a place of bitterness or negativity. They aren't judging the people who follow the trend with enthusiasm. They simply have a much tighter mesh in their mental filter, catching more details. The requirements for something to make it onto their worth-trying list are much higher. They demand more substance and less superficiality. This standard is significantly higher than those of the average person. And where does that high standard originate from? The answer is found in our next point. Sign number 4. They trust their own personal judgment more than the collective opinion. This is linked to a psychological concept known as an internal locus of control. In our modern digital era, we are often trapped in something called social proof. When you are about to buy an item on a website, what is the first thing you look at? You scroll down to see if it has a high rating and how many thousands of people have reviewed it. When you see a video with 10 million views, you instinctively assume it must be high quality. Our brains become overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information. So, we outsource our decision-making to the wisdom of the crowd. If everyone is doing it, it must be correct, right? However, those who stay outside the trend cycle are different. They rely much less on that social crutch than the average person, standing firm on their own. They prioritize their own first-hand evaluation over social proof, trusting their senses. They don't allow likes, shares, or an influencer's endorsement to make up their mind for them. If they read a book the entire world hails as a masterpiece, but they personally find it poorly written and full of cliches, they will simply close it and say, "This isn't for me," rather than pretending to enjoy it just to fit in with the popular opinion. They make choices based on their own logical reasoning and their actual life experiences. The primary difference is that the source of their choices is located firmly within themselves. They act rather than react, taking initiative in their decisions. They eat at a restaurant because they think the food is delicious, not as a reaction to it trending on a review app or social media. They wear a particular shirt because the material is high quality and comfortable, not because a celebrity wore it on a red carpet yesterday and made it popular. They prioritize personal comfort and genuine value over fleeting trends. And when they aren't constantly reacting to the thousands of distractions happening in the world, they manage to preserve something incredibly precious and often overlooked. This brings us to our final point. Sign number 5. They are proactive about protecting their energy. The psychological process at work here is known as selective attention. Here is the reality. In the 21st century, your attention is a form of currency. And every single day, you only have a finite amount of it to spend. Social media, news organizations, and advertisers are all massive, sophisticated machines. They are designed specifically to harvest that currency from you. People who refuse to chase trends understand one thing very clearly. Trends are essentially a never-ending flood of loud, chaotic data. This week, it's a celebrity scandal. Next week, it's a new viral dance. The week after that, it's a new piece of slang you are supposed to adopt. This is so you don't seem out of touch. Keeping up requires you to constantly take in information. Then you must process it and modify your behavior. It is an exhausting drain on your energy. These individuals decide they don't want to waste their limited mental resources. They avoid short-term pursuits that trade attention for temporary visibility. Such pursuits almost never offer long-term value. As a result, they build a firewall around their consciousness. They are incredibly selective about what is permitted to cross that barrier. They carefully choose what can occupy their thoughts. This is why you will see a very specific pattern of behavior. They try not to let an algorithm lead them around by the nose. They open their phone with a specific goal. They finish it and then put the phone away. They refuse to participate in conversations just for the sake of staying current. They would much rather remain silent at a social gathering. They don't fill their head with trivial facts just to appear informed. At this stage, the distinction becomes very obvious. Avoiding trends is no longer just a personality quirk. It is a strategy for survival. It is a shield used to protect their focus. It protects their psychological well-being. And most importantly, their personal depth. This is especially true in a society that is becoming increasingly shallow and distracted. And that is the final piece of their psychological profile. So, what is the takeaway from all of this? If you feel like an outsider every time you browse social media, because you don't understand why everyone is obsessed with a certain topic, and you don't even feel the urge to find out, take a breath. You aren't weird. You aren't behind the times. If you aren't being carried away by every passing storm of hype, it is likely a sign that you possess a very clear internal value system. It demonstrates a high level of self-awareness and robust personal standards. You are the one driving your own life. Instead of letting an algorithm take the wheel, in a world where everyone is sprinting in the same direction, simply because they see others doing it, having the strength to stand still and smile requires immense internal stability. Ultimately, throughout history, it has often been the people who maintained their independent thought. They were the ones who were able to forge a new and different path. Choosing to stand completely still while the entire world rushes past is not a sign of stubbornness. It actually reveals a profound inner strength to quiet the external noise and honor your personal convictions. Please stop feeling guilty for missing out on sudden cultural trends that feel foreign to your spirit. You have absolute permission to ignore the frantic societal rush and fiercely protect your own mental sanctuary. What is one deeply held value you refuse to compromise when popular opinion shifts abruptly against you? If this resonated with you, I warmly invite you to share your quiet truth in the comments. May you always find comfort in the gentle and steady rhythm of your own distinct path.